Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Frankie.
Hey, Casey.
Hey, my friend. How you doing?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Did you have a nice weekend?
I did. We've been having some really beautiful weather here, so
Awesome.
A lot to love.
Cool. So Frankie, I was just talking to Mr. Producer and saw your notes here. So this is kind of going to be like a fan show. It's kind of we're going to go over like now. Sometimes it works. Tell me what you think. Sometimes it works if you read the questions, or if you want me to read them. But sometimes it works if you read the ones that had come in before, and then Mr. Producer reads the new ones. You want to do it that way? What do you think?
I just think it's nice if you could read them, because I think that it just sounds a little more conversational and less one-sided. Okay. I enjoy that. Yeah.
All right, Frankie. I always love your show, and you're such a pleasure to work with. So
thank you. I feel the same, Casey. I think we have good rapport.
I do too. I really do. Like I feel comfortable around you, and I could, that energy we talk about. It's a good thing. So Frank, so I'm going to introduce this as like a fan show, and
awesome.
Because you always want to answer the questions, and I'll start the first question. I'll ask you, and then you do the answers, and I'll just ask the questions, and then Mr. Producer will come in and ask the new ones.
Sounds great. And you've got the ones that I think there are about 5 of them that we've got on there.
Yep. The first one I'm going to start with is, do you recommend?
Perfect.
All right, Miss Frankie.
All right, here we go.
Go. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. All right. Thank you, Mr. Producer. And I am always happy when I have a special guest who's sitting next to me. Well, not next to me, but on the screen next to me. It's Frankie Hart. Frankie, what's going on with you?
It's great to be here.
Frankie, I got to tell you, one of the things I love about you so much is that you, whenever like someone will write to you and we don't get to it, you're like, we got to get to them because they took time, and let's do it. So you wanted to do a whole show today on the fans and the people who wrote in. I think that's so cool, man.
Yes. It's an important part of me in my teaching that students feel free to ask questions. And I learn as a teacher and they learn together. And so I think the dialogue is really important. So I'm excited about today.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. But Frankie, before we get to your fans and the people who want to know more information that you have, tell us about your practice, how you got there, a little bit about you, just in case this is the people's first time hearing it.
Beautiful. So my name is Frankie Hart, and I opened Satya Life Yoga over 17 years ago now in Lakeland, Florida. I was a former modern dancer and choreographer, and was actually still doing that, actively performing when I opened the studio. And so here now it's sort of evolved, and we offer yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong classes. I have all different kinds of yoga classes for every walk of life, whether it's your first yoga class or you're an experienced yogi. If you're just a little baby in the womb, I teach prenatal classes, and I have students up until their 90s. We also do aerial yoga, and I do specialty workshops. Just this last weekend, Saturday, I did one on developing upper body strength.
Oh, tell me about this. Tell me, this is awesome. Upper body strength?
Yeah. So I, every now and then, like doing the questions, the fan show today, every now and then I'll ask my students, what are they interested in working on? And I had a couple of requests from students about developing what they called arm strength. And I said, great, I'll do it, but I'm not going to call it arm strength. because your arms don't work in a vacuum. They have to be associated and harmonized and stabilized by the trunk. And so much of what people think has to be their arm strength is really coming from their upper body strength, right? So like side plank is a common pose in yoga that sometimes people say, oh, I feel like my arm is just going to break off. And then I know that they're not accessing their trunk strength or their core strength. So we had a lot of fun, and this workshop is a perfect example of how I'm really passionate about working. I had people from my advanced classes all the way to people who are newer to the practice, to people who are interested in therapeutic benefits for shoulders, people who are trying to avoid shoulder surgeries, to people who are, big athletes. And if we really look at the alignment of the body and how the body is meant to move, we can take the pose, which is the asana, at any level. And so the goal for me of the workshop was, wherever you come in, I want to just help guide you to the next place.
It's so cool. Now, what are the benefits? Say you develop and from what I understand, if what I know is true, it's a lot easier for men to gain some more upper body strength rather than women, because of lack of testosterone. I mean, we're not going to get big, because I said when I should train people, women would be like, but I don't want to lose my femininity, right?
I don't want to get that big, right?
But it wasn't that at all. Please, your thoughts.
Yeah. So men have the advantage sometimes, especially if they've been working out, right? They come in often with a lot of strength. So doing like Chaturanga Dandasana, which is the low side of a push-up, right? So if you're in a push-up position and you lower down so that your arms are parallel to your body and bent, that's called Chaturanga. And that requires a lot of upper body strength if it's unsupported. So very often for a person who is athletic and say developed in their upper body, strength wise, they might be able to do that pose. But then later they're like, oh, my shoulder doesn't feel so good, because maybe they're muscling it, but they don't have the right shoulder alignment. Maybe their shoulder isn't properly externally rotated and the rotator cuff muscles aren't engaged, or what we call the shoulder girdle, the clavicles and scapula aren't in their proper alignment. So they're doing this over and over and over and over again. And that's often the problem sometimes when people come from a flow background. They're doing all these repeated sun salutations with chaturangas, but every time they're dropping into their shoulder, you see?
Yeah.
So that's where it's a great equalizer, because I might be helping a person who has great strength learn how to align their body better, right? Or supporting a person who is new to the strength, supporting their body in ways that they can start to develop that strength safely.
Got it. Now that example you just gave us, is that person learning flexibility? The person that's strong now learning the correct technique from you, is that bringing on flexibility? And how important is that?
You got it. So important. I mean, think about all those overhead lifts, right? So that's a real issue, because I'll have students who come who are doing these overhead lifts, but when I want them to lift their arm overhead with no weight, they can't do that with proper alignment yet, right? So you see the two work together so beautifully.
Yeah.
And then when we clear the region of the shoulder, we can support much greater weight, including our own body weight, much more easily without impinging the shoulder joint.
Wow, Frankie, why didn't I know you when I was competing? I think it would have been so much more like, because it's common for a guy to get muscle bound, as they say, it's muscle bound with the least flexibility. I wish I would have incorporated what you're teaching.
Well, it's never too late, Casey.
Okay, all right. I might take you up on that one day.
Okay.
All right. So look, Frankie gets a lot of people that want to ask questions, and it was her idea, because she's like, if people are going to write me, I want to answer, and I thought that was really cool. So she wanted to dedicate a show about answering these questions. So the questions I'm going to ask you now, Frankie, these are from week or two, just last week. What is this?
It's a bit of a mix. It's
a
mostly from
mix?
last week, but there were a couple from older shows too that looked pretty good.
That's how cool she is. She's like, well, if they wrote, I want to answer them. So, okay, let's start. You got work to do, Miss Frankie.
Okay, I'm ready.
You got Lindsay. You got Lindsay in Connecticut. Lindsay wants to know: do you recommend certain types of yoga for people that are recovering from injuries and surgeries?
Yes, I do. So here at Satya Life Yoga, I love it when people call the studio first. So that's something I'll get around to. So if you're out there and you're recovering from an injury or surgery, I highly recommend that before you go to a studio, call them and start to talk with them about your situation, your condition, and see if you're a fit, right? If the studio or the teachers are not interested in really paying particular attention to that, you might keep searching and find a place that is. So that's number one. I always say you want to create your own health team, right? And your yoga teacher should be one member of that team, right? So if that's working with your doctor, with your counselor, with your, whatever, your weight trainer, your physical therapist, all of the people that you're recruiting, your nutritionist, we want to be on a team for you. You're not there to please us, right? You're not there to make us look good, like, oh, they've got the perfect pose, and so now I feel okay going to that class. No. We're there for you. So that's first, and feel confident. Just like I tell people, interview your doctors. So, interview your yoga teachers, find out, are they interested in working this way? So that's number one. So first here, I love it if a person calls and then either my assistant or I can talk with them about what class would be appropriate for them. In general, I have a therapeutic essentials yoga class that focuses very much on the alignment of the body. And so I often steer people to that class first, because as we were talking about in the upper body workshop, if the body is aligned, we are pain-free. And this is where injury is so much our teacher, because if I have a shoulder injury, if I'm really, my window of alignment is smaller. So if I can get super, super focused and really carefully aligned, I have less pain than just normal in my day. If I have no injury, I have a bigger window where I don't have pain, but I don't have as much accuracy, you see? So very often when people are recovering from an injury, they end up stronger and more intelligent in their body than, say, a person who's never had that injury, because they've had to work through that, right?
Gotcha.
So number one, talk to the teachers, talk to the studio. Is this a fit? And so the therapeutic class is one I recommend. And then if somebody is working with something that they feel very sensitive about, like they're a little nervous about moving because they're just afraid they might hurt themselves further,
right.
Then I really enjoy working with that person for a while privately, doing one-on-one sessions, because then I can be completely focused. And they also know that they are not trying to distract from the class, right? Now, I tell my students all the time, you're not distracting from the class, you're adding to the class. Your question is adding to the class, just like this show is coming from our fans. And over time, they come to understand that. But in the beginning, if something is, if you're just not comfortable yet in a class environment, I recommend working with people privately for a little bit. Sometimes 1 or 2 or 3 sessions is all I need to help the student feel comfortable then going into a class situation. And then I have students who've been working with me privately for many, many years, 17, 20 years, just because they enjoy that medium. Yes.
Yeah. And you're in great hands when you're with Frankie, true expert, true pro. So great
Thank
question, Lindsay. Great question. Catherine in Minneapolis wants to know: is it normal to be sore after my first ever yoga class? And I want to hand this over because I know the answer.
Yes. And so the answer is yes, it is normal. And there's two sides to this, which is really what opens up a really wonderful discussion. The first is, wow, oh my gosh, I use my arms, I use my legs. I didn't realize, oh, my core, the next day I'm laughing and
Muscles
I
I
feel,
had no idea I had.
yes, muscles, exactly. Sometimes I'll ask my student, I say, where do you feel that? And they'll, with a smile on their face, that's the key, they'll say everywhere. So that's a big part, right? Yes. And when people say, oh, I'm sore the next day, and they're smiling and they've kind of got that good feeling like, yeah, I had more of a workout, I'm happy about that. Now, so that's all wonderful. So 1-2 days muscle awareness, we often call it new muscle awareness, right?
Okay.
That's wonderful. But then there is the other side where you're in soreness, but it's more entering into a region of a little bit of pain, right?
Okay.
That kind of sensation after yoga class means that you were probably working too hard.
Overdid it.
You overdid it. And so I have a couple guidelines for you.
Didn't listen to the instructor.
That hopefully that's the case, Casey, but all yoga classes are not the same.
Okay.
And I think it is unfortunate that there can be a sense of competitive in some yoga environments, which I want to really remind everybody out there that competitiveness is not encouraged in the Yoga Sutras. It's not really the quality that's behind yoga. So if you find yourself caught in that, hopefully your instructor is helping you guide yourself out of that. And in terms of overworking, I know when I was first studying yoga, I shared with you as a professional dancer. In the professional dance world, people don't usually say, oh, do you need a little break now? Right?
I got you.
I danced, I performed with quite a few broken bones. I understand this.
You're tough. You're tough.
Pushing through, right? Being an athlete. And so my first yoga teacher that I studied with significantly used to always say to me, Frankie, you're doing that dancer thing again. And it was our code language for, I'm not really listening to my breath. I'm not really listening to my body. I'm in my mind and I'm going for that goal pretty hard, right? I have a student, he's not in Florida anymore, but I have a former student, I should say, who was a rugby player. And I used to remind him, this is not rugby.
This is not rugby.
People should not be getting hurt doing this.
Right. But that's a mindset you're talking about.
It is. And so many of us have really been raised with this idea of no pain, no gain, right? Yes. And even no pain or I'm wasting my time, right? Right? It's out there, right?
100%, yeah.
If I'm not really sweating,
are you sure you haven't wrestled
and hurting? I know wrestlers. So okay. Yeah. So then what am I doing? I'm not really doing anything. Like somebody will say, well, then I don't really feel like I'm doing anything. And what I want to encourage you to do is trust the process, right? Stay the course. It will start to happen. Usually, by the time people are somewhere along the aging process, they start to listen to this more, right? But it holds true, even if you're 16 years old, it holds true. There still is too much is too much because that leads to injury. And my favorite image is I always tell my students, if you push too hard, it's the equivalent of driving really fast the wrong way on the highway. You're going to get somewhere and you're going to get there fast, but you're not going to want to be where you're going, right?
Awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. I got to remember that one.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Well,
excellent.
That's a great question. That was Catherine in Minneapolis.
And I love her question because a lot of people have that question, right?
Yeah.
And then they might think, oh, I wasn't sore. Did I not work hard enough? So I like this phrase. I often tell my new students, leave your body wanting more. Leave your body wanting more, because the next time you come to that pose, then I've got a little more wiggle room. I can extend into this a little bit more, right? But if we go fast, we're hitting those edges before we know it.
Great. I mean, true pro. That's a great point. It really is. Okay. Hey, Cindy in Dallas. When you were talking about certain lifestyle coaches in the yoga practice, Does this include staying away from things like drugs and alcohol? How can these substances affect us during yoga? Great question, Cindy.
It really is. And I think it's a question that is in a lot of people's minds sometimes, and maybe people don't feel comfortable necessarily talking about.
Yeah.
So this is why I love this venue, because we can talk about things together and hopefully help other people. So lifestyle choices. I often say, you don't have to stop smoking to do yoga, but after you do yoga for a while, you might stop smoking.
Nice. Nice.
So yoga doesn't ask anything of you, Casey. That's the interesting thing. Like you come as you are. You don't have to, you don't have to make yourself something else to start the practice of yoga. All right. So first of all, let's say that, right? Because yoga can be a great resource for people on paths even of recovery, okay, from addiction, right? It's a beautiful technique to help people on the path of recovery. So I want to put that out there. Like I'm not at all saying, oh, if you drink or if you do drugs, you can't do yoga. No, not at all. Do yoga. And maybe then when you start to ask yourself the question, is this choice that I'm making, is this supporting my lifestyle? Is this supporting the quality of my life, or is it diminishing it, right? So one of my yoga teachers, she hasn't eaten red meat, sugar, drank caffeine or alcohol or processed foods since the 1970s.
Wow.
But I do believe she hasn't seen a medical doctor since then either, right? So for her, food, she follows a macrobiotic pathway. Food and yoga are her disciplines, right? But that's a tall order. I'm not going to ask all of my students, oh, now we're going to be vegan and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because maybe that wouldn't even work for them, right? Maybe a vegan lifestyle would not work for their particular body type or lifestyle. But so there's flexibility here. But on the other hand, if we have choices that maybe we're a foodie, I have a friend who has, imports wine for a business, that doesn't mean that you can't do yoga and be an amazing yogi. But the challenge is to ask yourself, am I living, again, in moderation? Remember, we were talking about the yamas and yamas.
Totally. Yep.
Am I in moderation? Am I still in a conscious relationship with my body, with my breath? And where does that take me? So I like to encourage people to really have a personal awareness. Like, are these substances, are these something I'm using to escape from my life, right?
Good point. Yeah.
And if they are, then yoga can actually be a beautiful discipline, because yoga is about being in the here and now. I don't know if you've heard of Ram Dass, but that was one of his really big mantras: be here now,
Be
right?
present, right?
Be here now, be here now. And Ram Dass, way back in the days with Timothy Leary, were doing a lot of experiments with LSD to try to achieve a kind of spiritual enlightenment, right? But what Ram Dass later talked about, which I think is so beautiful, he said, we were doing all this stuff, but I always came down. And then I went to India and I met this guru, and he never came down. So what is this telling us? This is telling us that through the practices of yoga, little by little by little, we can become more and more present in our life, so that we're not trying to escape our life, right? And that then if there are things like we want to have a glass of wine, or we want to do things that are in balance for us, then wonderful. But if I have habits that are cravings, right? Cravings are something that in the beginning stages of an addiction would be like a craving. It's pulling me out of myself. It's pulling me out of what would be the best things for me in this moment, because it's filling a void, right?
Yeah.
So then the yoga helps us understand how can I take a different path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And realize that there's no void in me. Like the yoga really teaches you, like your inner being. If you remember from one of my earlier podcasts, your inner being is not damaged. Your inner being is never broken. Your inner being does not need to be fixed. Your inner being needs to be loved and have an opportunity to come out and play. So why then do we try to escape the present moment? And I think it's because many of us at times don't feel safe in the present moment, right?
Yeah.
And we are wanting to avoid these conditions because maybe we don't yet know how to deal with them.
Yeah.
So this is where the asana practice, the physical practice, the breathing practices, the philosophy of yoga, they can help us so much. And to understand we're not alone in this, right? We're not alone. And that when we start to listen to our body and listen to our breath, we're guided from within.
Love that. Great way to explain it, because a lot of people, go through addiction. It doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol or smoking.
Right.
It could be work. It could be relationships. Could be anything. But
Yes.
it seems to me, working with you, it's kind of getting into who you are, and like everyone's different. And I think you kind of got
Yes.
a way to get us there to think about it.
Yes. So let's dive into this one, Casey, because
Yeah.
I think it's a great one. Work addiction, right? So we could say, I love my job. Like, I love my job. I love my job.
Really? We can't see that.
I love my job. So maybe I'm working long hours, but I feel renewed and enlightened or just, light about it. It lights me up, right? And so there is that. That's wonderful. Keep going. But if the work addiction is that now I have free time and I can't relax in my free time. I don't know what to do in my free time. In my free time, I have anxiety, or I get angry, or I get frustrated, or I just, I feel that I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone with myself or my thoughts. I'm uncomfortable. Then, what's happening, right? So
Yeah.
then often then we'll just push further and further, or we're getting a sense of self-value from the accolades from the work, which we need. If we're alone, we don't feel good about ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That's that disparity. And so the yoga helps us to get comfortable in those quiet spaces.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a great way of putting that. And I think people can relate to that, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Producer, can I do one more here or what? I can do one more? Okay. All right, great. These are great questions, by the way.
They really are.
Yeah, people really in tune here. So let's go to Kelly in Detroit. Is that Mr. Producer? Is that one of mine?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Does yoga help us with weight loss on its own, or is it better to combine it with certain exercises? That's a great question.
It's an awesome question. And it's one I think it will be enlightening for people to hear this answer. So first of all, if you're brand new to getting back into your physical exercise, so maybe you've been estranged from your body, you've gained some weight, and you're looking to get out there, then I would suggest, yes, yoga, maybe some walking in nature. Walking in nature is so good for us, right? To get the fresh air and to get that natural human movement going. So in that way, if it's new for you, then absolutely just the yoga and some walking, perfect. Now, if you have other loves, I like to say yoga plus what you love, right? So if that's running, rock climbing, paragliding, weightlifting, scuba diving, belly dancing, and whatever it gets you going, right? Golfing, yes, and yes, and yes, right? So yoga is there to support what you love as well. So I think what you might find is if you're new to getting moving and you're just doing yoga, through the yoga practice, you might find yourself diving into other movement activities that you do love, right? So we want to get moving. And then the really kind of secret is that it is the limb. And if you're new to this, you could refer to our earlier podcast on the limbs of yoga. It is the limb of yoga pranayama, which is the breathing practices, that is the greatest importance for weight loss. Because in weight loss, in the pranayama practices, what starts to happen is you increase your oxygen. When you increase your oxygen levels, you increase your metabolism. As you increase your metabolism, you decrease your BMI, and then further practices start to detoxify the blood. The toxicity in the blood is keeping those oxygen nutrients to getting to those fat cells that maybe have been blocked. So you start to detoxify and you start to shed stored fat. Also, the pranayama practices help us with hormonal imbalances, which for many women are one of the causes of weight gain. So who knew that you were going to breathe your way into a fitter, leaner body?
That's awesome. Frankie Hart, I can't believe we're at the end already. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but these were great questions. I love this show. I loved hearing you answer the questions. We should definitely do a part 2 of this, Frankie.
I agree. I love it.
Let me give you the last word here. Anything you want to leave us with? And then once again, please, how to get a hold of you. Frankie, I always enjoy your show and great information. Thank you again.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say that a virtuous practice, right? So B.K.S. Iyengar, in his book, Light on Life, which is a beautiful book, he says, a virtuous asana, asanas are poses, is done from the heart and not from the head. So rather than think your way into your practice, let yourself feel your way in. And as we feel our way in, Casey, we start to listen and understand that inner voice, that inner guidance, that inner intelligence that is within each and every one of us.
Awesome.
So thank you. Satya Life Yoga, SATYA Life, at satyalifeyoga.com and 863-802-YOGA.
That is my friend, Frankie Hart, and can't wait to hear what you got to say next. Thank you, Frankie.
Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.